Hey everybody, Dave Howard here with Premier Risk Management. Tyson Gabriel's joining us today. I want to thank you for coming in and taking time to visit with us about this.
Yeah.
Hey, in our continuing series of Unmasking the Truth, today Tyson's going to walk us through all of the information that the CDC is using right now to quantify this masking requirement. I guess the short result of this is there's some misinformation again and not being completely forthcoming.
Well, I would even say it's a whole different level because when you start looking at the research and as exposure scientists being able to understand what the needs are to validate something as being viable to be used in a workplace setting or a normal setting, there's a lot of steps that are being missed here.
Okay.
As well as they're using equipment that I'm familiar with using, and their equipment's not being calibrated before they do this research. So
really,
this is very infuriating for me because this is an attack on the integrity of exposure science, and I'll have a lot of the stuff that we'll just highlight. So I've put in almost 100 hours in on this, and the thing to understand, there's about 73 studies now on the CDC's website.
Okay.
And some of them are just articles or abstracts, and then they'll have a list of recommendations for other research. So it's been this rabbit hole that I've been going down, and it's quite fascinating what I'm finding. But the more disturbing thing for me is that when this all started, for me, I thought this is a great opportunity for our industry to really showcase and
right.
be able to help the public and and give politicians, because politicians don't know, give them good, accurate information. And I can see that our officials in government have failed us completely. This is atrocity.
So, just out of curiosity, for the people that are watching, the CDC is pulling reports like the Mass General report. That was one of them, right? Is that buried in this also? Mass
General is a heavily utilized report that they're using to drive public policy, as well as another report that I'll talk about called the Mueller. I call it the Mueller Report 2.0. So it's,
I remember you mentioned that.
So that one is disturbing, and that's the study that they're using to validate the to drive the opinion or the statements of that mask, not N95s, not respirators, but that surgical masks, polycotton masks, things of that nature provide protection.
Okay.
And I'll be able to show that that is a bunk study and should be taken down.
Okay, everybody, buckle up because this is going to be fast and furious. It's going to be a lot of facts we're going to go through. And Tyson, take us in.
Alrighty. So the first thing that people need to understand, there's three factors whenever you're going to roll out PPE for public use. Obviously, you got to understand what's the purpose of it. Right? Is there a contaminant or what is its use meant to fulfill? Exactly. Then the second thing is you want to know how to use it. What protocols? How do you maintenance it? If it's disposable, when do you dispose of it? So on and so forth. But then the other thing you want to make sure you conduct a risk analysis on it.
Correct.
Because especially with the respirators, you're blocking an air pathway for people. Well, people have different health conditions, so what's that going to cause for certain health conditions? And these are all things that before you roll out PPE policy or PPE out to the public, these are things that you have to know. Specifically
why OSHA requires that if we're going to put somebody in a respirator because we've identified an exposure, we have to go through the process of making sure that they go see their physician, an industrial physician that's got this discipline in their background, so that they can approve whether or not this person can actually wear the respirator to start with.
Exactly.
Okay.
And seeing these things, are all missed. So we know that an N95 and a surgical mask are engineered. They're designed by safety engineers, and they have purpose. We have long-term use for it. Okay, but they're also disposable, and they're disposable for a reason. Okay, because they're not designed for long-term universal use. All right. So. And in addition, that we've introduced new masks into the public realm for protective use. Hasn't been studied by real scientists that have that qualification. A bunch of MDs, but they're not qualified.
Well, it's almost like a fashion statement now.
Exactly.
People are buying these. Everybody's making them, and they're all over the internet. And we don't really know what protection level they provide.
None. And the people that are so-called scientists that are providing this are not qualified scientists. So this is the equivalent of going to an optometrist when you have a foot problem. So we're we're listening to the wrong people, essentially. So what I want to kind of recalibrate the question of whether or not, like, people are out in the public realm saying, do masks work or not? That's not the right question. All right, that's not the question. Any form of PPE that's properly designed and properly used will work, all right? And as long as you're using it for the purpose of its design. So the real question is there science that validates the use of PPE masks beyond their scope of design?
That's a good point.
That's the real question here, okay? So I'm just going to get into just some of the guiding principles that I use whenever I'm looking at research, okay? So hierarchy of evidence. The main thing of so we talk about hierarchy of controls, there's hierarchy of evidence.
Right.
So there's research that you do that determines, okay, how far are we at a point now where it's provable enough that we can make public policy off of that, okay? So basically, like a level 4 is the lowest. It's an idea, a hypothesis that you can kind of perform maybe a low-level lab study on, but that drives you to a level 3 where there's promising results from the level 3. Maybe you do more expansive tests with equipment or in your lab or that nature. A level 2 would be like a randomized controlled trial.
Okay.
And RCTs are good studies because there's actually human interaction. You're looking at real life scenarios, real life conditions. Except I would even go a little bit different on that, a little bit further on that. Is like RCTs are typically done in hospital settings or medical settings, so they're not equivalent to like a construction site or manufacturing facility. So there's that gap in RCTs. And then the system reviews, that's the highest level of hierarchy of evidence. That's a level 1. That's the equivalent of doing like human trials with a vaccine.
Correct.
So basically what they've done here is nothing on the CDC's website, nothing exceeds a level 3.
That's interesting.
Nothing. There's not one thing in there that would go past a level 3. And that's, so for layman terms, that's like rolling out a vaccine without human trials. So we're just saying, I mean, it probably not even animal trials. Like this is basically you're theorizing things in a laboratory, and we're rolling it out.
It's a hope and a prayer.
Exactly.
Okay.
So all these studies, they also convolute masks with respirators. So the N95 is a respirator. I mean, we call it a mask. People will call it a mask, but the N stands for non-oil resistant. Okay, so that means you can't use it in an environment where there's paint and lubes and things like that are being utilized. And the N95 means that the filter is 95% efficient.
Yes, okay.
You're not going to achieve that unless it seals to your face.
Correct.
Okay, and we demonstrated that in our fit test video. You can go back, I think that's a few videos back, but if you're curious about that, please watch that. That's a great one. So they all convolute, and what they do when they convolute it is they'll take the N95 data, which is superior for protection, because that's what it's designed to do, okay? Right. And compare it with a surgical mask, which is not designed for protection. Right. So they're trying to quantify these things as though they have equal value, and they're taking those numbers and convoluting it. Also, all the case studies that they do, where they're out looking at people or observing public mask use and whether it's effective or not, there's other hierarchy of controls that are being utilized. So hierarchy of controls, the greatest form of control is elimination. Obviously, substitution. Yep. So if you have like a chemical that you can replace with something that's less hazardous, that's an example of substitution. Engineering controls, so like the UV technology we've talked about, it's an engineering control. The HVAC systems, those are systems that will perform without human interaction. All right, and they have great efficiency and great capability. Then you want administrative controls, so you're trying to adjust behaviors.
Correct. So
that would be like hand washing, social distancing, things like that. Those are higher form of controls. Those are a top tier of control than PPE mask use. So in all these studies where they're saying, oh, the masks are working, there's other controls being utilized. Sanitation, social distancing, HVAC systems. So, but they're attributing that control to the mask use, which it's contaminated. So that study's contaminated. You can't pinpoint it. All you can do is affirm the different types of controls that are being used and validate that formula of control, that formula of various controls works in those scenarios. That's the conclusion that you should be drawing from.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah. So It's nuts. But all right, so all the studies. So you would think that we're talking about exposure science, right? So you want to have an exposure scientist review your study. None of them did. Not a single one.
Not one.
Not one. These are all, and that's great. You have the alphabet before and after your name. That's wonderful. But if your training is not in exposure science, we have gynecologists on here that are doing these studies. I'm sorry, but that's not. You're not an exposure science scientist. Like you don't have the qualifications to drive this kind of work and research to drive policy. And again, none of them. So this is what they're doing. They're saying the mask catches droplets. Well, no kidding. That's what they're designed to do. All right. And then they're saying, okay, great. Our work is done. But they didn't do any risk analysis on that. When we know that mask contamination is a proven fact. All right. That's why there's donning and doffing procedures. That's why there's disposal procedures. We know this with OSHA. Like, if you have a respirator protection program and you're using reusable respirators with filters, you got to have a change rate with when you're changing your filters, because contamination is a known fact.
Based on the exposures in the environment you're working in.
Yes.
We're back to that again.
Exactly. So they did no risk analysis on any of these things. And these guys are running around saying, oh, the filtration does this. We're done. Work is done.
Yep.
Well, now these people have a gunk of crap in their mask. What do you do next? Zero research on that. Nothing. So all of them are incomplete.
Yeah.
All of them are incomplete. They don't tell the full story. Again, purpose of the PPE, how to use the PPE, and what are the risks with the PPE. They did not fulfill that requirement before you roll out PPE to the public. All right. So some of the studies now we have this popular. And we have Tony Fauci out there running around telling people, oh, double masking is just common sense. It's the most ignorant.
It's irresponsible,
unprofessional, just
correct.
He has no integrity with what he's talking about right now, and I know he knows that this is what he's throwing out there is not correct. It's not true. All right. So the double mask study, if we'll show a picture of it right here. So if you look on the left side of that, it literally says it uses dummies to determine that.
I remember reading that
95% that those masks with the double masking provides 95% protection. So you're not even using, you're not even simulating, you're not even. So that would be like a level 1, level 2. Okay, all right. Now you got to put it on people. All right. Now we got to see, because human beings, what we know is that when we're utilizing any kind of respiratory protection device or anything that covers our mouth, when you breathe out of your mouth, when you talk, things like that it's effectiveness to stay on your face. All right.
Talking, using facial muscles,
exactly,
it causes your seal to be compromised.
Exactly. So we know that they didn't do that. All right. Now, and they use this other study. I call it the Mueller study. That's what we talked about earlier.
Correct.
So this is an interesting one. They omitted out of their final paper. So they use this equipment called pore count. All right, and that's what we used in our.
We demonstrated in that video that Tyson referenced earlier. You should go back and look at that.
Yep. So the pore count, it's a respirator fit testing device, quantitative fit test. So their pore counts weren't calibrated.
Wow.
They omitted that in their final paper, but I have their first one where they actually talk about that and how they did their little personal subjective calculations on it to make sure it was okay. Yeah, that right there, gone.
That negates the whole study.
The whole study's done just on that fact alone. All right, but they went further. All right, so this study, they put someone in a mask, they wrapped nylon around them, told the person, don't breathe out of your mouth, don't move your head, and then this is the main study they're using to determine.
This is the one where they told them to breathe out of your nose, don't breathe out of your mouth.
Yes. And this is what they're saying. This is the science that they're using. This says mask will protect you. Unbelievable. Anyway, so the Mueller study is used even in this new double masking nonsense that they're recommending. So that's one of their key studies.
And this is on the CDC website.
Yes.
This information is how they're justifying what they're doing. That is incredible.
It's beyond me, beyond the pale. Anyway, so they also have airplane studies. All right. How do I begin? So they attribute the masks to protecting people on the airplanes, all right? So you're in the Air Force. I come from an aviation family. I did some more research on airplanes, on their filtration system, their air filtration system. So they have a air change rate within every 5 minutes during flight. And I didn't realize that they are actually bringing in fresh air. About 60% of that air is fresh air, at least every 5 minutes, all right? They also use HEPA filters, high efficiency protectant apparatuses. And a HEPA filter will capture very small particles like the viruses and so forth. Now, you also notice the air pushes down in an airplane.
Correct.
All right? It goes into it's a laminar flow, which means that it's not scattered. It's a very controlled, measured flow. And so if you are coughing or if you are talking and droplets or aerosols are getting in, it's being pushed down, you're likely not going to, that's a huge protective piece, a huge engineering control, all right? They're not even recognizing that in their mass studies on airplanes.
Wow.
And the greatest chance to get exposure on an airplane would be during the pre-flight, when they're doing the pre-flight checks. Because once that air is going, unless you're on an aisle maybe and someone's right next to you, the likelihood of you getting exposed in that kind of air or environment where it has that kind of airflow is very minimal. Yeah, very minimal. So they give no recognition to the engineering controls on an airplane.
And if I remember right, the FAA came out with new cleaning procedures for the aircraft.
Yep.
So they're doing additional cleaning. They're doing they're doing a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And none of that's mentioned.
No, none. And these are higher levels of controls.
Yes, they are.
Administrative engineering controls.
Correct.
PPE is your last line of defense. It's the weakest, lowest form of control. All right. So the hair salon, this is another popular one. And this is also crap. So so they claimed that almost 140 customers, they had a couple of sick people in this hair salon. Everyone wore a mask. 139 approximately customers, no one got infected and all this. All right, so sounds great on the surface, all right, except when you start digging into it. So they were only able to talk to 104 of the 139 customers. So there's 35 people that they don't know anything about. That's a quarter of the people. Okay. All right. Then they have only 67 out of that 104 were tested. All right. So the other 37 were never tested, but it was the honor system. They were to self-report. However, this is during quarantine and isolation. So you self-report to the government. Guess what you do? You're locked down for a couple of weeks. You don't go to work. You don't get a paycheck. So they were incentivized. They weren't incentivized to tell the truth.
Correct.
So you had half the people that they don't have factual data on. Guess what? I don't even know if that's a level 2. That's ridiculous. So basically, what it is, you have 52% of the test group they know nothing about, and yet they lied. They lied and told people 139 we know didn't get sick. That is a lie. They do not know that. All right. And then there's this other Fisher study where they talk about, do droplets come out of someone's mouth when they talk? Duh. And they use, what's even better, they use an iPhone for their research. They didn't even use like any kind of real sophisticated technology. Yeah. To answer, they ask themselves a question that we've had the answer to for a long time, and then they just reaffirmed, yep, droplets do come out of your mouth when you talk.
So all this information, I know there's a lot more, and we're going to continue to do these. We're going to continue to feed the data out to you. Why? I guess that's the question we keep asking ourselves. Why? Why would they not level with the American people, tell them the truth? Why would the CDC put this kind of garbage out? Because that's what it is.
Complete garbage.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's fiction. I go back and forth with ideas. I think the one that always remains the same for me is that many of them were caught off guard. They had an incompetent response early on. They didn't even follow protocols. I worked for the public health department for early on in my career. I knew there were certain things that they should have been doing early on. They didn't. They were losing credibility, I believe, from the get-go because they weren't on top of their game, and they threw this out as a Hail Mary to help gain some credibility with the public. Also, the public was clamoring for it in March because there's this myth. There's this perception that a mask protects you, but we've always, when I worked for the public health department, we always joked about it being the adult binky. All right, doesn't protect you, doesn't give you the kind of coverage that you think it does. It doesn't do what you think it does for you, but the people have this perception that it does, so they gave it to the people to make them feel better. That's all it does. It makes you feel better.
Wow.
So
as we continue to go down these series, we're going to continue to bring you actual facts that we can prove.
Yep.
We're not just going to grab things off the internet, listen to a celebrity scientist or some bureaucrat that really doesn't know what they're talking about. We're always going to bring you the truth. We're always going to be able to substantiate what we're telling you. We know the facts, and we're going to continue to dig. We're going to continue to look. Until next time, Tyson, thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of you out there that are watching this and you want to challenge anything that we're saying, please challenge it. We would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, because the reality is, are we missing something? Because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And if you think we're wrong on something, challenge us, message us,
bring us your facts.
Give us a call. We'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely. And as always, you know how to get a hold of us. 1-800-980-RISK. 1-800-980-RISK. You can also go to our website at premierrm.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and check your facts. Don't just trust what you're being told.
Have a great one.